The battlefield above Cyrenus was a storm of chaos. Endless explosions rippled through the darkness of space, their light flashing across the hulls of ships, both human and alien. Laser beams crisscrossed the sky, shredding the fabric of the universe in violent arcs. Commander Elias Stone's pulse hammered in his ears as he clung to the controls of his fighter. His hands moved instinctively, twisting and turning as the ship swerved to avoid enemy fire. His squadron had been scattered, and now he was fighting alone, surrounded by enemy vessels far outnumbering his own. "Come on, Stone, get it together," he muttered under his breath, weaving his ship in and out of a barrage of lasers. He had been in tight situations before, but this felt different. This was desperation. The aliens had hit hard and their fleet was closing in. It was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed the human forces. The comms crackled in his ear, and he heard a familiar voice, one that made his heart skip. "Elias, you still alive in there?" "More or less," he replied, his voice dry. "You wouldn't believe the mess I'm in, Walsh." "Yeah? Thought I heard you yelling at your ship. Come on, save some of that energy for the enemy." Elias grinned despite the tension. His squadron's pilot, Walsh, was a relentless optimist. He could find humor in any disaster. It was a trait that had kept Elias sane through countless missions. But now it felt a little off. Even Walsh couldn't mask the heavy silence creeping into their words. "All right," Elias said, taking a deep breath. "Tell me we're getting some backup, Walsh." "Negative. Command's busy trying to keep the rest of the fleet from getting wiped out. Looks like we're on our own for this one, buddy." Elias swore under his breath. His thoughts drifted to the alien queen, the one whose name he didn't even know, yet whose face haunted him. He had seen her once, in a flash of violent movement before the chaos erupted. Her figure, regal yet impossibly dangerous, stood out even among the alien forces. She had been fighting in the midst of her own soldiers, her armor reflecting the laser fire like a beacon in the night sky. His mind told him she was an enemy, yet something about her had called out to him. Something deep inside had urged him to act. His moment of contemplation was cut short by the warning blare of his ship's alarm. A massive alien craft loomed ahead, its weapons locked and ready. It was bigger than anything he'd ever seen. The odds of surviving a hit from that beast were slim to none. And yet he felt a strange calm come over him as his instincts took over. His fingers danced over the controls, slamming the thrusters into overdrive. "Here we go," he muttered to himself. He dove into the storm, swerving and rolling to avoid enemy fire. But just as he lined up for a perfect shot, his sensors beeped in a panic. The Queen's ship was in his path, surrounded by enemy fighters, her craft taking heavy fire from all sides. His heart skipped a beat. No, not now, not her. He had a choice: escape and let her face the full force of the enemy, or risk everything to save her. For a split second, Elias hesitated, his mind grappling with the impossible odds. He was supposed to be fighting for humanity, for his comrades, not for an alien queen. But something stirred in him, an instinct he couldn't ignore, a sense of responsibility. She was vulnerable, isolated in the heart of the battle, and no matter how strange it seemed, Elias couldn't just leave her to die. "Walsh," he snapped into the comms, "cover me. I'm going after that queen." "Wait, what?" Walsh's voice was incredulous. "Are you out of your mind, Stone?" "She's one of them. You'll get yourself killed." "I don't care," Elias growled. "Just cover me." He didn't wait for a response, throwing his ship into a sharp dive. The alien queen's vessel was a massive behemoth, nearly a quarter of the size of his fighter. Its sleek, armored surface shimmered like dark chrome, a terrifying beauty amidst the madness. He had no idea why he was doing this. Maybe it was because she reminded him of the fragility of life, how one wrong move could erase everything. Maybe it was because he had seen the way she moved on the battlefield, as if she was more than just a warrior, more than just a queen. There was something undeniably human about her. With laser precision, Elias cut through the swarming enemy ships, taking out one fighter after another. His heart raced, but there was no time for fear. He was running on pure adrenaline now, guided by an almost irrational need to reach her. He pushed his ship to its limits, weaving around debris, dodging enemy fire, and finally positioning himself to draw the enemy's attention away from her. Now or never, Elias muttered. His fighter surged forward, breaking through the last line of fire to come between the Queen's vessel and the attacking ships. With a roar, he released every weapon at his disposal in one final, desperate burst. Explosions rocked the space around him, the flashes blinding in their intensity. But there was no time to celebrate the victory. He was already moving again, locking onto her ship's emergency docking port. The comms flared to life again. Walsh's voice, frantic and sharp, cut through the chaos. "Stone, you've got to be kidding me! What the hell are you doing?" "I'm not leaving her," Elias spat, his hands steady on the controls as he lined up his ship for the docking maneuver. His heart pounded in his chest. "Commander, no! This is a suicide mission." "I'm aware," Elias replied dryly, his lips curling into a grim smile. "But someone has to do it, right?" The docking bay doors opened with a hiss, and Elias pushed his ship into the chamber, barely avoiding an incoming blast from an enemy fighter. He felt the sudden, unsettling lurch as his fighter connected with the Queen's ship. His heart pounded in his ears as he unbuckled himself from the seat and raced toward the airlock. The door slid open, revealing the Queen standing in the center of the docking bay, her long ears twitching as her violet eyes locked onto him. She was surrounded by soldiers, but there was no anger in her gaze, only curiosity. "You're insane," she said, her voice a blend of surprise and something else. Something Elias couldn't quite place. "Maybe," Elias replied with a tired smile, his breath still heavy from the chase. "But I'm here, and I'm not leaving." Her lips curled slightly, and for a brief moment, Elias saw something change in her eyes. "Then you are my savior," she said, her tone laced with something unreadable. Elias blinked, trying to understand what had just happened. "Yeah, well," he said, trying to lighten the moment, "you're lucky I'm a sucker for impossible odds." Her smile widened. "Perhaps," she said, "but there is more at play here than you realize." Elias didn't have time to ask her what she meant. The battle was far from over, and for the first time in a long while, he had no idea where this path would lead. Elias woke up to the soft hum of unfamiliar machinery, a rhythmic sound that was strangely comforting. He blinked against the brightness of the room, momentarily disoriented. His body felt heavy, as though it had been put through an industrial-grade washer and left to dry in the sun. His legs ached, his arms burned, and his head, well, it throbbed with a reminder of how he'd risked his life for an alien queen. His stomach flipped at the thought, but before he could dwell on it, he heard a voice. "So the mighty human wakes." He groaned and turned his head toward the sound. The alien queen stood by the window, her posture regal, but there was something odd in the way she stared at him. Not cold, not judgmental, just curious. "Am I dead?" Elias croaked, trying to sit up. His body protested, but he forced himself to stay upright. Did I just get a one-way ticket to the afterlife?" The Queen turned to face him, her long ears flicking slightly. "You are still alive, Commander Stone. I cannot say I understand how, but you are." He gave her a pained smile. "A surprise to us both, huh? But I'll take it." There was a silence, and for a moment, Elias wasn't sure if she was going to respond. He half expected her to dismiss him, perhaps for being too ridiculous, too human. But instead, she walked over slowly, her armored feet making no sound on the floor. "You saved my life," she said, her tone unreadable. "That is something not many would do, especially for one like me." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Well, if you're referring to the whole alien queen bit, don't worry, I've done dumber things. You wouldn't believe the mess I got into back at the academy." Her eyes narrowed in amusement. "Dumber things? You risked your life to pull me from the grasp of your enemies. What could possibly be dumber than that?" He laughed, wincing at the pain. "Well, one time I decided it was a good idea to try and pilot a training ship while heavily caffeinated. You'd be surprised how quickly a coffee machine can make a ship look like a wreck." For the briefest moment, there was a flicker of amusement in the Queen's eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. "I am sure that was an enlightening experience." Elias smirked, feeling the tension in the room start to ease. "Yeah, enlightening and embarrassing. But hey, I survived. And now here I am, saving you from a much bigger wreck." He leaned back into the bed, trying to stretch his legs, though they still felt like jelly. So tell me, what's the deal? I saved your life, but I don't know a thing about who you are, what you stand for, or even why you're fighting. For all I know, you could be the queen of a species that eats humans for breakfast. The queen's lips curled slightly, as though she was considering his words. I am not in the habit of eating my enemies, Commander. At least, not literally. She paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. I am Queen Lyris of the Vakran Empire. We are at war with your people because of centuries of bloodshed. But that war is not one I started. It is one my ancestors began, and I was thrust into it. Whether I like it or not, I must lead. Elias blinked, surprised by the candor. So this whole war thing is just inherited? That sounds like a fun family tradition. Lyris tilted her head, seemingly intrigued by his sarcasm. It is not a tradition. It is a curse, a never-ending cycle of violence. Elias sighed and rubbed his temples. Yeah, sounds familiar. Not exactly my idea of a great vacation spot. But here's the thing. I didn't sign up for any of this. I didn't plan on saving an alien queen today, and I sure as hell didn't plan on getting dragged into intergalactic politics. You saved me because you could, Commander. You did not think, you simply acted. There is more to you than I anticipated. He snorted. Yeah, well, sometimes I do stupid things. It's a talent. Her expression softened slightly, though the air between them remained charged. It was not stupidity, it was bravery, something I did not expect from a human. Elias couldn't help but smile. Well, I do aim to surprise. He paused. But seriously, Lyris, why me? Why the big risk for you? I'm just one soldier out of, what, thousands? Lyris stepped closer, and for the first time her presence felt less intimidating. You are not like them, Commander. The humans who fight for power, or those who see this war as a means to an end. You fought for something else. Elias stared at her, unsure of what to say. Was she referring to the fact that he had risked his life for her? That didn't feel like a heroic gesture. It felt like pure impulse. But then, wasn't that what made him human? The ability to act, often without understanding the consequences? Maybe that was why she looked at him differently now. Maybe it wasn't just about saving her life. It was about a spark of something more. Before he could process his thoughts, there was a sudden, sharp chime from the ship's intercom. Elias sat up quickly, wincing again. Commander Stone, came the voice of Walsh, crackling through the speakers. Where the hell are you? We've been trying to reach you for hours. You're supposed to be on the front lines, not taking a nap with the enemy queen. Elias groaned, leaning back against the pillows with a smirk. Oh, just casually saving the life of an alien monarch. Nothing special. There was a pause, and then Walsh's voice returned, laced with disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. The Queen of the Vakran? Stone, what are you getting yourself into now? I think I'm starting to understand the concept of trouble, Elias replied dryly. But hey, I'm still alive. That's got to count for something. Lyris, standing nearby, listened to the conversation with a raised eyebrow. Walsh seems to have a unique perspective on things. Elias chuckled. Yeah, he's got a habit of making things sound way more complicated than they really are. But trust me, Lyris, this whole situation is already complicated enough without him getting involved. I do not wish to make things more complicated, Commander, Lyris said, her voice quieter now. But I am bound by forces much larger than either of us. Your presence here has changed something. I do not know yet what that is, but I feel it. Elias stared at her for a long moment. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, but he couldn't help but find a sense of humor in it all. Well, if you're feeling anything, it's probably just the aftershock of the blast. Trust me, it'll wear off in time. Lyris didn't laugh, but there was a subtle shift in her expression. Perhaps you are right, Commander, but I do not believe you are here by chance. Elias raised an eyebrow. So, you're saying the universe is sending me on some cosmic mission to be your sidekick? That's, well, a bit much for me. I did not say that, Lyris replied, her voice firm. But I do believe the galaxy has its own way of bringing unlikely allies together. Whether you are ready for that or not, I do not know. Elias leaned back again, trying to make sense of it all. The galaxy wasn't exactly short on chaos, but this was something else entirely. He had just saved a queen, an enemy leader, in the middle of an intergalactic war. And now he was stuck here, having a casual conversation with her as if they were old friends. At least that was how it felt, and that was the weirdest part. Well, Lyris, he said with a crooked grin, if the universe insists, then I guess I've got no choice but to go with the flow. But I gotta warn you, I'm not the best sidekick. I'm more of a get in trouble and hope someone saves me kind of guy. She tilted her head slightly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Then perhaps we make a good pair. Elias grinned. Yeah, maybe. Just don't get any ideas about me wearing a cape, all right? That I would not ask of you, she said, her tone just the slightest bit warmer than before. Good, Elias replied, chuckling despite himself, because capes are a serious safety hazard. The days aboard the Vakrin warship blended into one another. Elias had spent most of his time in the infirmary, recovering from the battle, his body still healing from the strain of his near-death experience. However, the Queen's presence lingered in his mind more than the physical pain did. Queen Lyris wasn't just an alien ruler. She was an enigma wrapped in armor and a crown. Every moment he spent with her, whether it was in conversation or in silence, was a revelation. He had grown accustomed to her sharp wit, her cool demeanor, and that strange quality she had that made her seem both distant and approachable. But the longer he stayed on her ship, the more questions arose. Elias found himself walking the halls of the warship, trying to make sense of the war, the politics, and his own place in all of it. It wasn't until the third day, as he sat in the command center, trying to adjust to the chaotic rhythms of alien technology, that things took an unexpected turn. Commander Stone, I trust your recovery is progressing. Lyris's voice broke through his thoughts. Elias looked up from the strange console in front of him, the interface buzzing with alien symbols and graphs. Yeah, I'm getting there, he said, rubbing his sore shoulder, though I think my arm is trying to revolt against me. It's like I've been in a wrestling match with a machine. But you know, I'll survive. Lyris stepped into the room, her presence as commanding as always. She was dressed in her royal armor, her long ears flicking slightly as she observed him. The Vakrin have many ways of healing, Commander. If you wish, I can have the ship's medics accelerate your recovery. It is possible to enhance your body's healing capabilities using Vakrin technology. Elias chuckled. Sounds tempting, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for the whole alien enhancement thing just yet. The last time someone offered me a quick fix, I woke up in a completely different place with an odd craving for space rations. Lyris didn't laugh, but he noticed the smallest hint of amusement in her expression. I see. I would not wish to induce further discomfort. Elias shrugged. Nah, I'll pass. But thanks for the offer. Besides, I've got a more pressing question. What exactly is going on with the war? You've been a bit tight-lipped about it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle shift in her otherwise composed expression. The war is not something I speak of lightly, Commander. It is the result of millennia of conflict, of bloodshed. It is ingrained in our society, in our very being. The Vakrin are a proud race, but pride comes at a cost. I get it, Elias said, leaning back in his chair, trying to find a comfortable position amidst the alien tech that surrounded him. But I'm not asking for a history lesson. I'm asking about the now, about how I ended up here. Why am I involved in all of this? Lyris crossed the room, her footsteps silent on the metallic floor. She seemed to deliberate for a moment before answering, her voice softer now. You were not meant to be involved, Commander. No human was. But fate, or perhaps something greater, has a way of drawing us all into its orbit. You are here because you saved my life. Elias let out a small laugh, though it was tinged with bitterness. That's a lot of pressure for a guy who's just trying to survive. You know, I was just trying to get through the day, and suddenly I'm your personal bodyguard and… What? Some kind of cosmic hero? You are no hero, she replied calmly, but you have done something that many would not. You chose to act when it mattered. That is not nothing. He nodded slowly, then leaned forward, looking at the console again. All right, so let's say I'm not a hero, but I still don't get why you, of all people, would be stuck in this war. You don't seem like the type to be led around by the nose. Lyris's gaze shifted, and for the first time, Elias saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. I was not born to be a queen. I was born to be a warrior, a leader in the fight for my people's survival. But power has a way of changing a person. It is not always easy to see the path forward when you are burdened with the weight of a crown, especially one that is tainted with the blood of generations. Elias leaned back, trying to make sense of it all. That sounds like a lot to carry. I guess I can't blame you for not wanting to talk about it. Lyris's expression softened ever so slightly. There are times I wish I could abandon this role, but I cannot. Not when so many lives depend on it. Elias scratched his head. Well, I get it. I do. But here's the thing. What happens now? You're not exactly on the best terms with my people, and I'm pretty sure no one's going to throw us a party anytime soon. So what's the plan? The plan, she said, her voice firm once again, is to survive, to continue the fight, to find a way to end this war, once and for all. Okay, and how do you plan to do that? Elias asked, a bit skeptically. Not exactly a lot of peace talks going on right now, huh? Lyris stared at him, her eyes intense. I have no intention of negotiating with those who would see my people destroyed. We will fight. But there is one thing that could turn the tide of this war, something that could bring about peace, if only it were to fall into the right hands. Elias raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Some secret weapon? Not a weapon, Lyris replied. A relic. The ancients left behind many artifacts, scattered across the galaxy. Some are tools of great power, others are mere symbols of knowledge. But one relic, lost for centuries, could change everything. Let me guess, Elias said. We're going to have to go on a treasure hunt? Lyris nodded, her gaze unwavering. Indeed, and I need your help to find it. Elias sighed dramatically. Great. I just wanted a simple life, you know. But now I'm an intergalactic treasure hunter. Fantastic. Lyris did not laugh, but there was a certain hardness to her expression, a determination that could not be ignored. I am not asking for your assistance lightly, Commander. This is a dangerous mission. The relic is hidden deep in enemy territory, guarded by forces far beyond anything you've encountered. But you are the only one who can help me retrieve it. Okay, Elias said, rubbing his temples. I'm in. I'm always in for the impossible missions. But we're going to need a lot of coffee. A whole lot of coffee. Lyris looked at him, unamused. Coffee? Elias grinned. It's a human thing. Keeps us from falling asleep in the middle of universe-saving quests. Trust me, you'll need it. She didn't reply, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at her lips. Very well. We will find this relic together. But be warned, Commander. It will not be easy. I wouldn't have it any other way, Elias said with a smirk. Let's go save the galaxy. Or at least try not to get blown up in the process. Lyris looked at him, her expression unreadable, but something in her gaze shifted, almost as if she was seeing him in a new light. Perhaps, Commander, you will prove more useful than I imagined. Elias stretched, his body still sore, but his mind racing. It wasn't the kind of mission he had signed up for, but then again, nothing in his life had ever gone according to plan. So why should this be any different? All right, he said, standing up. Let's get this over with. One relic, lots of danger, and, hopefully, no more life-threatening injuries. What could go wrong? Lyris's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she turned, her voice steady and resolute. Everything, Commander, everything could go wrong. The final mission was nothing like Elias had imagined. The artifact, the relic that could change the course of the war, was hidden deep in the heart of the enemy's most heavily fortified planet. A place where the air felt thicker, the gravity heavier, and the silence louder. And yet, despite all the odds, they had made it. He, Lyris, and a handful of the most skilled warriors from her crew stood at the edge of the ancient ruins, staring down at the glowing, cryptic symbols etched into the stone. The sun was setting in the sky, casting an eerie glow across the alien landscape. It should have been beautiful, but to Elias, it just felt like the calm before a storm. And given the kind of luck he had, he was almost sure there would be a storm. "You're sure this is the place?" Elias asked, eyeing the entrance with a mix of skepticism and wariness. Lyra stepped forward, her expression unreadable as always, but there was something in the way she held herself, something softer, more open. Maybe it was the relief of having finally reached the end, or maybe it was the recognition that her world had just changed in ways she couldn't quite explain. "Yeah," she said, voice steady but with a trace of urgency. "The relic lies within. We have no time to waste. If we fail here, the war will never end." Elias looked at her, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "No pressure, then," he muttered under his breath, though he knew she'd heard it. Her eyebrow twitched, but she said nothing. They entered the ruins together, the air growing colder with each step. The walls seemed to pulse, as if the entire place was alive, resonating with some ancient energy that neither of them fully understood. The atmosphere hummed with an ominous tension, and Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. But he pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the task at hand. The relic, they were told, was a small, unassuming stone, no larger than a human's fist, that held unimaginable power. To any ordinary observer, it would have seemed like just another forgotten artifact of a dead civilization. But to those who knew, it was a key, one that could turn the tides of war. And Elias had come to realize that the key wasn't just for peace, it was a key for change, for something more than the endless cycle of fighting and death. After what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine corridors, they finally found the chamber. And there, at the center, was the relic. It was perched atop a pedestal, glowing faintly in the dim light. Elias took a step forward, his breath catching in his throat as he reached for it. But just as his hand brushed the stone, the ground trembled. A loud screeching sound echoed through the chamber as the walls began to shift, revealing a group of armed figures emerging from the shadows. The enemy had found them. "Figures," Elias muttered, his hand still on the relic. "I knew this was too easy." Lyris didn't hesitate. She drew her blade, a gleaming sword that seemed to shimmer with its own energy. "We fight," she said, voice filled with resolve. "We take the relic, and we make sure they do not leave with it." Elias nodded, his pulse quickening. His first instinct was to fight. He had done it countless times before. But something about this moment felt different. He glanced at Lyris, at her unwavering confidence. And for the first time since he had been brought aboard her ship, he felt like he truly understood her. This wasn't just a battle to her. This was personal. She wasn't fighting for the Vakran, or even for victory. She was fighting for the future, for the chance to create something better. With a deep breath, Elias drew his own weapon, a standard-issue blaster, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. He needed something more. "What are you waiting for?" Lyris snapped, slashing through one of the enemy soldiers with swift precision. "Do you want to survive this, Commander?" Elias smirked. "I'd love to, but I'm going to need a little help." And with that, something inside him clicked. In that moment, everything he had learned on this journey, the danger, the camaraderie, the sacrifice, suddenly made sense. It wasn't about being the hero. It wasn't about saving the day. It was about standing with those who needed you, about finding the strength to do what was right, even when it seemed impossible. Lyris glanced at him, sensing the shift in him, but didn't pause to comment. She just fought, and Elias followed her lead. They moved together as if they were one, each anticipating the other's next move. It was chaos, pure and simple, but it was a kind of chaos that Elias had learned to embrace. "On your left!" Lyris shouted, slashing through another opponent. Elias didn't need to be told twice. He fired his blaster, taking down 2 more soldiers with a clean shot. For a moment, everything seemed to blur together, a blur of gunfire, sword strikes, and the heavy scent of burning metal. Then, as quickly as it began, it ended. The enemy lay defeated, their bodies scattered around the chamber. Elias stood, panting, his heart still racing, but something had shifted. The air was different now, charged with a sense of finality. Lyris approached the pedestal once more, her eyes never leaving the relic. She reached out, her fingers brushing the stone, and for a moment, nothing happened. But then, the relic hummed, glowing brighter. "The war ends here," Lyris said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of triumph and sorrow. Ilias stepped forward, his gaze still on her. "What now?" She turned to him, the faintest smile on her lips. "Now we rebuild. Together." He nodded. Together. As they left the chamber, the relics safely in their possession, Ilias couldn't help but think back on the journey that had led him here. From the chaos of the battlefields to the strange, uncertain alliance they had formed, he had changed. He had learned to trust, not just Lyris, but himself. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time, he believed that peace might be possible. And as the Vakran warship set a course back to the heart of the galaxy, Elias realized that sometimes the greatest victory isn't found in the battles won, but in the connections forged along the way. In the end, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about being there for those who needed you, no matter how different you were. As Lyris stood at the helm, staring out into the stars, Elias couldn't help but smile. The universe was vast and their journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. "We did it," he said, leaning against the wall. Lyris didn't turn to him. She didn't need to. "Yes, Commander, we did." And with that, the two of them sailed into the unknown, ready for whatever came next. The throne room of the Virelian Dominion did not allow for echoes. Sound was absorbed by 1,000 microscopic filaments embedded in the black marble walls, designed to create silence so absolute it could drive an untrained mind to madness. The air was cold, perfumed faintly with crushed ice petals and discipline. Queen Aurelia sat at the peak of this architectural void, her posture an impossible sculpture of grace and latent threat. Her golden hair shimmered like weaponized sunlight, and her long ears, aristocratically curved, tilted subtly with each breath, listening to what no one dared to say aloud. Her ministers flanked her like wary satellites, orbiting a star they could neither approach nor outshine. Across from her, a regional warlord attempted to explain poorly why his outpost had lost 3 tactical cruisers and a bioforge to unexpected resistance. Aurelia's eyes, silver with twin vertical pupils, blinked once. The silence stretched so long the warlord began to sweat, which made the entire line of advisors tense. Sweat meant guilt. Guilt meant disposal. "Perhaps," she said at last, her voice like chilled velvet, "you should try expected resistance next time. It seems to surprise you less." He began to protest, something about meteor interference, but she raised one finger and the guard stepped forward. He was gone before the echo of his cowardice had fully faded. Aurelia leaned back, bored. Her court would interpret that boredom as a dangerous omen. Good. She didn't bother with the next case. She rose, dismissed them all with a flick of her hand, and vanished into the private corridors that webbed through the palace like nerves. She didn't know why she was restless. It wasn't the rebellion on the outer moons. Too small. Not the stolen stealth drones. Handled. Maybe it was the strange unease that had crept in since her last planetary inspection. Something she hadn't accounted for. Something emotional. Ugh. She stalked down a narrow corridor, passing guards who stiffened and avoided eye contact. She could hear her own heartbeat, precise and even, and yet something in it felt off. She accessed the restricted surveillance archive. The entire galaxy's worth of data was available to her, but she selected a small, unremarkable skirmish. Human insurgents caught smuggling refugees through a minefield. Not worth her time. But the report included a note that caught her attention. One human male refused evacuation until his wounded child was located, extracted, and stabilized. Carried her across live minefield. Ridiculous. Inefficient. He should have been vaporized. But still, she tapped the screen. The feed began. A field of smoke and plasma burns. The human, armor-scorched, limped through fire with a small child slung across his back. The child was crying, no, singing, some off-key, sputtering human song. He joined in, laughing mid-stumble. A mine went off nearby, and he ducked, clutching the girl tighter. "You call that a lullaby?" Aurelia muttered to herself. Still, she didn't stop watching. She watched when he collapsed into a crater, checked the girl's vitals, and made a terrible joke about a potato-based energy bar being the pinnacle of Earth cuisine. She watched as he shared the last of his water and pretended the Medrone's needle was a space unicorn. The girl believed him. So did he. She replayed the footage. Then again. By the seventh replay, her aide knocked twice, tentatively. "Your Radiance, the High Strategist, is requesting—" "Tell him I'm communing with quantum fate," she said. The aide wisely fled. By the 10th viewing, she was laughing. Not delicately, awkwardly, like someone trying out an unfamiliar language and mispronouncing every syllable. She covered her mouth, startled at herself. Then she pulled up the soldier's profile. Elias Wren, Sergeant, survived 17 engagements, widowed. One daughter, Mira Wren, age 6, Earth cycles. She paused, tapped her finger on the screen. Again, then leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Family. The word was unpleasant. Software. In the Dominion, family meant obligation, breeding rights, genetic leverage. Children were raised by cognitive engineers, not parents. Emotional attachment was considered a pre-death anomaly. So why had watching a grubby man sing to his bleeding offspring made her heart do that ridiculous flutter? She needed to study this further. Within hours, a transport was dispatched to intercept Elias Wren's evac ship, rerouting it under the guise of decontamination and reassignment. No harm, of course. That would skew the results. She wanted the subjects unaltered, and she wanted them nearby. Her aides expressed concern. "Your Radiance, the presence of a human child in the capital. I find her educational," Aurelia said, "also mildly explosive." They looked confused. She didn't explain. The humans were housed in a secure but comfortable facility within the palace. She instructed her engineers to install cloaked observation panels and began watching the subjects like a hawk in a lab coat. She told herself it was for research. The first night, Elias tried to cook a freeze-dried protein slab. It hissed and foamed. Mira called it an insult to both science and dinner. Aurelia made a note. The second night, they played a game involving numbers and jelly beans. Mira cheated spectacularly. Elias pretended not to notice. Aurelia laughed again, quietly this time, almost fondly. By the 5th night, she was mimicking their bedtime routine, brushing her hair in the same rhythm Mira used, humming the strange off-key song Elias sang. She even attempted a joke with one of her sentinels. "What do you call a disloyal general?" she asked. "I don't know, Your Radiance." "Deceased." The silence that followed was painful. She sighed. "I'm working on it." The sentinel nodded, sweat pouring down his temples. "Very promising, Your Radiance." She turned back to the observation feed, where Elias was teaching Mira to build a toy shuttle out of scrap parts. She just installed a propulsion module made from a spoon and chewing gum. "It's not about efficiency, Dad. It's about style." Aurelia leaned forward, elbows on her knees, chin resting in her hands. Her long ears twitched. She didn't understand them, but she wanted to. Elias suspected something was off the moment the decontamination process lasted longer than a full sleep cycle. The automated scans had completed hours ago, yet they were still confined to the guest suite that had more advanced plumbing than most entire planets. Mira was ecstatic. She'd discovered a self-cleaning art wall and was deep into her second mural of a blue dog with laser eyes rescuing a wormhole-trapped hamster. "You think the aliens like hamsters?" she asked, smearing color-change pigment across the wall. "Only the classy ones," Elias said, checking the room's temperature for the 3rd time. It hadn't fluctuated in 16 hours, which was about 16 hours too consistent for a Dominion facility. Mira made the dog's tongue glow. "What about spaghetti? Maybe they're spaghetti people. Like, long and squiggly." "They're more of a freeze-dried algae soup crowd," Elias muttered. "You ever seen a spaghetti person hold a spoon? It's like a sad puppet show." Mira giggled and switched to drawing a very serious-looking spaghetti person in a space tuxedo. Elias sat on the couch, plush, too plush, like it was watching him back, and sighed. They weren't prisoners, technically, but they weren't free either. The guards were polite, silent, and utterly unnerving. The food was excellent. The water was purified to a degree that made him suspicious. And their handler, a short woman named Corvenna, smiled like she'd read about smiling in a manual and was giving it her best shot. "Your stay is of the utmost diplomatic importance," she had told him. "Please consider yourselves honored guests of the Varelian throne." Elias had smiled back. "If I'm so honored, why does the door hiss when I walk past it like it's judging me?" Corvenna had paused. "That is a humidity regulation function." "Sure it is." Still, he hadn't pressed. They were safe. Mira was safe. For now, that was enough. Unbeknownst to him, Aurelia had already reviewed 17 hours of footage and concluded that the child was a tactical genius in disguise. Her manipulation of her father through pouting and comedic timing was more effective than most Varelian negotiation protocols. The Queen had compiled a dossier labeled Mira Wren, Potential Diplomatic Asset Emotional Saboteur. She had also, reluctantly, begun a series of family behavior emulation exercises in the privacy of her meditation chamber. This included such arcane rituals as asking about someone's day and pretending to be impressed by finger paintings. Her chief steward walked in during one such attempt and found her nodding solemnly at a holographic macaroni nebula. "Impressive," she said flatly. The steward blinked. "Your radiance, is that pasta? It's art." "Understood." Meanwhile, Mira had begun her own reconnaissance. She had noticed a strange shimmer in the mirror. Someone was watching. Not in a spooky way. More like a teacher pretending not to supervise recess. So she began performing. Morning cartwheels. Bedtime concerts. Once she pretended the sink was a sentient faucet named Frank, who only liked jazz. Frank became a recurring character. Aurelia, watching all this, found herself laughing so hard at one of Frank's jazz solos that her internal translator warned her of possible diaphragm strain. She ignored it. Instead, she commissioned a Varelian composer to draft a tribute to Frank the Faucet. The composer was confused. The result was a 6-minute opera titled Moisture and Brass. It was not a hit. Elias finally confronted Corvenna during their scheduled health check. "Look," he said, arms crossed, "I've been patient. I've filled out your forms. I've tolerated your medically unnecessary scans and let you watch my kid build wormhole hamsters. But it's time you tell me what this is. Why are we here?" "Really?" Corvenna blinked. "Diplomatic interest." "Try again." She hesitated. Then, to his surprise, she handed him a small, sleek device. "The Queen requests your presence. Alone." "Of course she does," he muttered. He was escorted through a series of gleaming corridors that hummed with faint quantum vibrations. Everything smelled like sterilized prestige. At last, he was brought into a private chamber filled with strange artifacts. Childhood toys, primitive and clunky, arranged next to military commendations and preserved alien flora. It was like walking into the scrapbook of a warlord with unresolved emotional conflicts. Aurelia stood at the center, wearing something that might have passed for casual attire in a parallel dimension. Her long ears twitched as she regarded him. "Elias Wren." He bowed slightly. "Your Radiance. I assume this isn't about my excellent record of space plumbing repairs." "No," she said. "It is about your child." Elias's shoulders stiffened. "If this is some kind of leverage—" "She is unusual," Aurelia said. "Her behavior, her strategies, her language. She's 6. I have observed her command over you. It is formidable." He blinked, then laughed. "She's a kid. That's what they do. They figure out how to wrap you around their tiny, sticky fingers. You don't resist. You survive." Aurelia tilted her head. "She offers no utility, and yet, you care." Elias sighed, rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I don't know what kind of royal boot camp you grew up in, but where I'm from, you don't need a reason to love your kid. It's not about function. That is inefficient. That's family." They stood in silence. Aurelia studied him. She expected condescension, pity, but there was only curiosity. "Would you allow her to teach me?" she asked. He blinked. "Teach you what? Hopscotch? Sarcasm? Family?" He couldn't help it. He laughed so hard he had to sit. "You want Mira to teach you about family? Lady, she thinks the space is powered by dreams and spaghetti." Aurelia nodded solemnly. "I am prepared." Elias shook his head, still chuckling. You know what? Sure, but on one condition. She raised an eyebrow. Name it. You tell her Frank the faucet is real. Aurelia blinked. Obviously. The first lesson began with finger puppets. Mira, seated cross-legged on a vibrational balance mat designed for high-ranking Varelian diplomats, had declared it too wiggly and stacked 3 pillows on top. Aurelia sat opposite her in full ceremonial posture, back impossibly straight, hands folded in her lap, face carved from Imperium marble. These, Mira announced, holding up her hands, are Mr. Toast and Queen Squirrelton. They're married. He makes breakfast and she fights space pirates. Aurelia examined the mismatched sock puppets like they might explode. Fascinating. Are they genetically compatible? No, they're in love. Duh. Aurelia considered that for a moment. So they are malfunctioning. Mira grinned. Nope, just weird. Elias leaned against the far wall, arms folded, trying not to laugh. Corvina stood beside him, furiously taking notes on her tablet, as though the puppets held the secrets of galactic diplomacy. The room was one of the smaller conference chambers. Though small, was relative. The walls pulsed with gentle starlight simulations, a feature Mira had immediately declared dreamy, and the ceiling displayed slow planetary drift, which she called sky soup. She'd insisted the queen sit like normal people, which apparently meant on the floor, preferably with a marshmallow. There were no marshmallows in the Dominion. This had caused a diplomatic stir so complex it resulted in a special delegation being sent to the culinary labs. Aurelia regarded Queen Squirrelton with wary respect. How does one defeat a space pirate using a plush acorn? It's not just any acorn, Mira said gravely. It's a truth nut. When you throw it at someone, they tell their secrets. Like that one time my dad told me he ate my emergency chocolate bar and blamed it on a solar flare. That was a miscommunication, Elias muttered. It was a cover-up, Mira shot back. Aurelia tilted her head. A device that compels confession through edible projectiles. Intriguing. You could make one, Mira said, with your science and stuff, and your bossy voice. I do not possess a bossy voice. You sound like you're about to give the moon detention. Elias choked on a laugh. Corvina stopped writing, then slowly resumed. The second lesson involved baking, or what passed for baking in the Dominion. Mira had requested cookies. Aurelia had no idea what those were. But within 2 hours, the Dominion's top nutritional engineers presented a tray of meticulously calibrated hexagonal nutrient discs with a molecular crumble factor and synchronized sweetness bursts. These taste like homework, Mira said, chewing grimly. They are optimized for emotional reward and minimal caloric regret, one chef protested. Real cookies are messy, Elias added, picking one up. It hissed and self-sealed around his fingers. Or haunted, he said. Aurelia, watching the exchange, carefully bit into one and frowned. I believe I am experiencing the chemical equivalent of disappointment. Welcome to childhood snacks, Elias said. The third lesson was a game called No Touching the Floor, which quickly escalated into full-scale strategic maneuvering. Mira designated the floor as lava made of alien toothpaste and appointed herself Supreme Jumper General. Elias was promoted to Lieutenant of Pillow Recon. Aurelia, after brief hesitation, requested to be Captain of Tactical Furniture Alignment. She took the job very seriously. At one point, a floating sculpture of the Virelian battle fleet was converted into a climbing platform. The guards outside twitched but did not intervene. Mira leapt between a couch and a chair, shouting, "For honor and snack privileges!" Elias misjudged a jump and landed halfway in a plant pot. I regret nothing. Aurelia, perched majestically atop a reinforced shelving unit, declared, The lava has claimed your lower extremities. You are now lava-infused. Your rank is upgraded. Nice, Elias said. Do I get lava powers? No, Aurelia replied, but you smell minty. By the end of the session, Mira had declared the queen almost fun, and Aurelia had begun compiling a list titled Family Dynamics, Absurd but Effective. Privately, Aurelia began her own observations. She had never seen a child disobey so freely and yet remain so adored. Mira questioned everything. She made noise. She rolled her eyes and hugged people and asked too many questions and tried to lick a floating power node because it looked like candy. And yet Elias never punished her for thinking. He explained. He redirected. He negotiated treaties with the seriousness of an admiral. Aurelia began testing this. She interrupted their bedtime routine with formal announcements. Your brushing duration has exceeded planetary health guidelines. Mira stuck her head out of the bathroom. I got lost in the bubbles. Your father allowed this? He said I was negotiating peace with my molars. Aurelia turned to Elias. This is your strategy? She's got a tough dental union, Elias said. During a quiet evening, Aurelia asked Elias the question that had been circling her thoughts since lesson 1. Why do you allow her to contradict you? He looked up from the child's drawing she'd gifted him, a scribble of him wrestling a dragon made of socks. She's not a soldier. She's a person. People ask questions. That's how they learn. In my experience, questioning authority leads to instability. Sometimes, but never asking questions leads to collapse. She considered that in silence. That night, she sat alone in her meditation chamber. The holographic macaroni nebula hovered above her. She had placed Mira's sock dragon beside it. The chamber felt warmer somehow. She reviewed the footage of their lessons again, paused at a moment when Mira had fallen from a cushion stack, bumped her head, and started to cry. Elias didn't panic. He didn't scold. He just held her. And Mira, even while sniffling, had said, I'm okay. You're here. Aurelia replayed that part 3 times, then once more slower. The next morning, she requested a lesson in hugging. Mira blinked. You don't know how. My people do not engage in contact-based reassurance rituals. Mira looked horrified. That's illegal. It is. Uncommon. Elias watched from the doorway, arms crossed, grinning. Okay, Mira said, nodding like a little general. Step 1, arms. Step 2, squeeze but not like a toothpaste tube. Step 3, don't stand like you're waiting to be attacked by emotional birds. Aurelia crouched, arms awkwardly extended. Mira barreled into her with all the force of a small, enthusiastic asteroid. Aurelia stiffened, then slowly, very slowly, returned the gesture. Her eyes widened. So this was warmth. This was chaos, compressed into contact. Terrifying, tremendous, and completely real. Elias woke up to find Queen Aurelia sitting at the foot of his cot, holding a half-melted popsicle in one hand and a small, slightly singed training bot in the other. She looked contemplative. The bot looked traumatized. She challenged me to a duel, Aurelia said, nodding toward the closed door where faint giggles could be heard. Terms were unclear. There may have been marshmallow explosives. Elias rubbed his face and sat up. How bad is it? The training room has entered what your people call a marshmallow lockdown. Fire suppression systems are experiencing confusion. Confusion? They now believe foam sugar is a Class C biohazard. He stared at her for a long moment. Did you win? Aurelia looked mildly offended. Victory was distributed. Mira declared herself Queen of Sticky Combat. That tracks. The morning proceeded with relative peace. Mira was occupied constructing what she claimed was a time disruptor using spoons, elastic bands, and a confiscated wrist communicator. Corvenna trailed behind her, taking notes and occasionally muttering, "That's not how gravity works," while Mira cheerfully ignored her. Meanwhile, Aurelia observed from a distance, standing so still she was mistaken twice for a statue and once for a coat rack. She did not flinch when Mira flung a spoon at the ceiling and declared it had pierced the quantum veil. Later, Mira asked if planets could get divorced. Not technically, Elias said, peeking into the stew rations Mira had renamed Gray Despair. But metaphorically, yes. They just drift apart? Sometimes they crash first, Aurelia added quietly, and sometimes they find a new orbit. Mira stared at her for a moment, then gave her a cookie. It was on day 3 of relative chaos lessons that everything went sideways. The Varelian High Conclave summoned Aurelia for an emergency transmission. Protocol dictated that no humans be present for these meetings. Elias, already suspicious, watched from a discreet corner of the observatory deck, using the reflection in a hydroponic pod to monitor the meeting. On the hollow screen, 11 Dominion leaders appeared. their images flickering like irritated ghosts. They spoke in a rapid dialect, but Elias caught the keywords: breach, contamination, unacceptable attachment, compromised protocols. Aurelia stood still as a tower. "You were instructed to observe the human," one delegate hissed, "not absorb him." "She has named you anti-spikes," another sneered. "Do you not find this humiliating?" Elias saw her jaw tighten. Not a flinch, not a word. "She hugged you, Aurelia, a gesture of regression. You were meant to lead." "I am leading," she said calmly, "just not in the direction you prefer. Affection is a disease." "No," Aurelia replied. "It is a cure." The feed cut out. The room dimmed. Elias approached cautiously. "I take it that went great?" She didn't answer at first, then, "They've ordered me to return." Mira entered just in time to hear that. She stopped mid-cartwheel, which was impressive. "You're leaving?" Aurelia turned. "Yes." Mira looked at the floor, then back up. "Because of me?" "No." Aurelia knelt. "Because of them. And I must decide what kind of queen I will be." Mira sniffled. "Are you coming back?" "That depends." "On what?" "Whether I am allowed to follow what I've learned. From you. From your father. From your ridiculous plush weaponry." Mira wiped her nose. "You mean the nut of truth?" "It is remarkably effective." They hugged, longer than before. Elias pretended not to watch too closely. Before she left, Aurelia handed Elias a sealed crystal. "If anything happens, if Mira needs me, this will summon me." He took it. "I hope I never have to use it. She is more precious than my throne." He looked startled, then nodded slowly. "She'd agree." Aurelia departed in her sleek silver vessel. Mira stood by the viewing panel long after the ship vanished. She said nothing, just fiddled with a piece of leftover duct tape. Eventually, she turned to Elias. "Is it possible to miss someone before they're gone?" He crouched next to her. "Every day." That night, Mira declared she would build a queen locator with popsicle sticks. 3 days later, the Dominion declared Aurelia compromised, publicly. 2 days after that, Elias and Mira were summoned to a security debrief. It was a trap. The room was windowless, featureless, and full of very serious Varelian agents who smelled vaguely of ozone and punishment. "You are accused," one announced, "of emotional infiltration." "Is that worse than emotional indigestion?" Elias asked. No one laughed. The lead agent stepped forward. "You tampered with our queen." "She tampered back," Elias said, "with marshmallows. Unacceptable. She will be removed permanently." Mira froze. "Like, forever removed?" "Indeed." Elias reached into his coat, slowly, deliberately. He pulled out the crystal. The room flashed with light, humming like a star swallowing its pride. A rift opened. Aurelia stepped through. She looked radiant, angry, and possibly wearing armor made from recycled snack packaging. "I believe," she said, voice sharp as solar flares, "you've made a clerical error." The agents drew weapons. She raised a single hand. Everything stopped, literally. Time paused. Elias dropped his spoon mid-soup and it hovered mid-air. Only Mira could move. She picked up the floating spoon, ate it, and said, "Cool." Aurelia walked forward, eyes blazing. "You taught me that a ruler without compassion is just a tyrant with extra steps." "Poetic," Elias said, still frozen somehow. "You taught me laughter is a weapon, that chaos is a kind of art, and that love—" She looked at Mira, who was now using the floating agents as makeshift climbing frames. "Is not weakness, it's gravity." The agents vanished in a ripple of displaced physics. Time snapped back. Elias blinked. "Did we just get rescued by affection?" "Technically, affection and quantum mutiny," Aurelia said. Mira cheered. "That's our anti-spikes." Aurelia turned to Elias. "There's no place for me back home." He raised a brow. "So what now?" She straightened. "Now I learn what it means to stay." The spaceship's new name was the Wobble Queen, and it was Mira's idea. Aurelia had lobbied for something noble, like the Sovereign Flame or Void Ascendant. Mira argued that those sounded like perfume brands for very angry birds. After a democratic process involving 3 sock puppets and 1 cookie bribe, the child's vote won. Elias adjusted the gravitational stabilizer, which now also doubled as a popcorn maker, thanks to Mira's engineering. The Queen's technology had merged with Earth-based quirks like it had been waiting centuries to get weird. The ship hummed with mismatched harmony. Sometimes it whistled show tunes. No one knew why. Aurelia sat cross-legged on the floor of the common area, deeply engrossed in assembling what looked like a tea set made from decommissioned laser cores. Mira hovered nearby, attaching googly eyes to everything that didn't already possess sentience. Corvina supervised with the exhausted air of someone who had once commanded fleets and now negotiated treaties between stuffed animals and sandwich crusts. "We've been invited to a diplomatic summit," Aurelia said, balancing a glowing teacup on one knee. "They want to discuss the implications of interspecies familial bonds." Elias raised a brow. "Are they expecting PowerPoint or puppet theater?" "They requested both. I believe they think I've gone entirely native." Mira popped up from under the table. "You're only 50% native. The rest is recycled aluminum and sarcasm." Aurelia considered that. Acceptable ratio. The summit took place on the neutral moon of Threllis Prime, a place famous for its low gravity and high-strung political hosts. Elias wore a borrowed diplomatic uniform that made him look like a well-dressed sofa. Mira insisted on wearing her honor cape, which was really just a bath towel with stars drawn in crayon. Aurelia, resplendent in ceremonial armor that now included a tiny stitched heart on the shoulder, led them through the corridor of assembled species. The Varelian High Conclave stared as they entered. Mira waved. A few delegates instinctively ducked. The lead delegate stepped forward. "Queen Aurelia, you were exiled under breach of protocol." Aurelia replied smoothly. "And yet, here I stand, not breached, upgraded. You've abandoned the path of command. I've discovered command is not incompatible with care. You were designed to rule. I was designed to obey. I have since become inconvenient." The hall went silent. Elias cleared his throat. "If I may, she hasn't changed. She's expanded. Turns out the heart has unlimited cargo space." A small delegate from the Jelly Nebula sniffled. "That's so poetic." Corvina stepped forward. "And strategically sound. Emotional alliances increase retention and reduce uprisings by 63%. We did the math. Twice." Mira ran up, holding a pie chart made of actual pie. The conclave was not convinced. "You've exposed our queen to instability, chaos, attachment." Mira raised her hand. "That's me." The delegate glared. "You are not part of this council." "I'm part of her." Aurelia turned slightly, eyes flicking to Elias. "They taught me that love is not a disruption. It's a formation, a foundation. You have jeopardized your legacy." "No," Aurelia said. "I've rewritten it." The conclave muttered, then deliberated, then argued over procedural cheese logs. After an hour, they returned. "We do not accept your return to the throne." "I do not seek it," Aurelia replied. "I found another kingdom." There was no applause, just stunned silence. A week later, the Wobble Queen received a message. Political chaos had ensued. Half the Dominion's younger generation now sported bath towels as honor capes. One council member defected to start a puppet-based education movement. Another opened a bakery. Back aboard the ship, life resumed its new normal. Mira continued building theoretical machines powered by jelly beans. Corvina started a blog called Diplomatic Disasters and Domestic Delights. Elias fixed what Mira broke, and occasionally broke what Mira fixed. Aurelia began teaching leadership seminars with topics like mutiny with a smile and how to rule without vaporizing anyone, except maybe once. One night, as stars shimmered like curious thoughts, Elias sat with Aurelia near the observation dome. "You miss it?" he asked. "The crown?" "Yeah." She looked at him, then at Mira, asleep on the floor surrounded by half-built moon habitats and one aggressively affectionate robot. "No," she said. "I finally understand what it means to hold something more precious than power." Elias nodded. "Us humans are contagious like that." "Lethally so." They laughed quietly. Later, Mira stirred. "Are you staying forever?" Aurelia lay down beside her. "Forever is uncertain, but I'm staying for all the important parts." Mira smiled in her sleep. The stars outside shifted, as if making room for something new.